I'm here with Tommy today. How are you doing, Tommy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So my understanding is that you're a home builder. One of the I was reading through your articles, and one of the statistics I think that stood out, which it's true, but it's also kind of shocking, is that was it 50% of clients that you build a home for end up breaking up. And I just thought, like, just that, obviously, there's so many directions we can go with that, but doesn't that isn't that just a great symbol of how so much of our life is based on the assumption that if we plan everything out, we have a blueprint, and then we do the work and we go through the steps, and we do everything right, we do everything perfect, and we finally have our perfect structure, perfect home, whatever. Then we can just rest and relax, and then we've achieved this kind of heavenly state. We're kind of building our own Tower of Babel, and then we are gods and we just rule over the universe. But in fact, people find, and I can relate to this personally, is that once that process ends, so to speak, or people think that they're working so that they can retire. They're working so that then they can end the process and finally begin to enjoy life. And then they find this sense of emptiness, and then they start focusing on disagreements. And I find this to be true about friendship. I think that all friendship is a building process. Friendship is not a trophy that you put on the wall and say, we've achieved friendship and now we're friends, because friendships come and go. And so friendship is a process of building together, and any relationship is a process of building together. And if you think that if your outlook on a relationship is, oh, I can't wait to get over this building process so we can just enjoy the relationship. No, it's the building process is the enjoyment of the relationship. That's not to say it's easy, or that it's always simple, but that is the value that we get out of relationships. And so, yeah, I just there's so many directions we could go with that, but those are my initial thoughts reading that. And maybe you can jump into that, and you could also kind of give a little introduction on how you came. I guess you're a third generation home builder, so this is something you've been doing. That relationship or that process is not just within your own life, but over multiple lifespans. So I guess you could give us a little bit of background on that, of not just how you started doing this, but maybe how your grandfather started doing this and what that was like.
So interestingly, my grandfather's adopted. I'm from the north of England. We all are. We were all born in the north of England, and I don't know too much about how my granddad got into carpentry and construction, but back then it was very different. And he's passed away now. This is really some time ago, and so it was a very different atmosphere. He was literally um, building with his hands. He was laying bricks with his hands. The guys were digging holes with shovels. So that was his way of working, and he built his own house but with his partner, for his family, and raised my dad there. And my dad eventually moved into this too, growing up. My dad actually had he my dad had an interest in kind of he did many things. He was a sportsman, and he was pretty good at anything he turned his hand to. So he even had like games with, I don't know if you know snooker, but he would play snooker in one of the snooker centers in the north of England, and he'd have some games with like Ronnie O'Sullivan, and characters like this who were like world champions, just because he was around that scene. And he played rugby. He was a very good rugby player. He was in the final for a really high quality team back then called Hunslet, and he broke his leg in the final. So that dream also went out the window. Um, and he eventually settled, working with his dad, you know, started bricklaying, doing the same things. Like my granddad taught my dad. That's something. For a long time, they worked together. Now, that didn't necessarily happen with me and my dad. Like the way I kind of came into it was over the child holidays, you know, the summer holidays in school. Like I'd always be on the sites with him, but he worked a lot in London because there wasn't much work in the north of England in the 90s. In the 90s, like England was still, at least in the north, was pretty rough. Like there'd be, actually, I won't go into that, but it was a pretty rough place. So there wasn't much work in the north. And so my dad wasn't around too much. Eventually, when I left school, the thing is, I had an interest in childhood, and late teen years, I got kicked out of my house at 16 by my mom. My mom and dad separated anyway, long before then. And I kind of struggled a bit in my late teens. I was, let's say, you could say I was difficult, actually, more just being a teen, you know? I wanted my freedom, I wanted things, and so I didn't start working with my dad full time. I kind of like worked with him on and off. And eventually I got myself into a better place after a few difficult years. Like in my early 20s, I was 21 and I got an apprenticeship doing furniture making. So I went to learn that side of things too. I'd been doing like interiors with my dad. And then, yeah, I learned this skill. It took me 2 years to learn how to build furniture and do kind of fine detailed interiors. And I left England. I'd had enough with the kind of like the thing there, the work, the lifestyle, the communities that were there. I needed to try something fresh, so I decided to go on like a journeyman, and I went on around Europe, mostly in Germany and France, and eventually ended up in Amsterdam. But I worked with a lot of really cool people, and I visited a lot of really interesting projects, like various different projects. Like farming projects, communes, squads, kind of interesting squads as well, because there was kind of like these like right wing and left wing squads back then. It wasn't just like what you'd call left wing. There were also some right wing. I don't really appreciate labels at this point in my life, but some people use them, and I do fall into it sometimes. So, but that's what was. So I just had to look around, see what people were doing. I've always taken an interest in people, and you know, sometimes there's crazy characters around. So I just kind of traveled around Europe doing these things, and eventually I settled in Amsterdam when I was 24. Yeah, 24. And now I've been here 9 years. I built an interior carpentry company, renovating houses. I've been doing that 10 years. That's where I'm at now with my journey, but I just decided to quit. I'm done with it. I'm really done with this work. I'm done with the making white boxes or making fancy things. For people that want to spend, you know, various amounts of money, like sometimes tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, for things that they don't necessarily appreciate that much. And I've just come to find that I feel like this is not, considering the fact that the state of families, the state of relationships, and in some cases, the circumstances in which kids are growing up, and the issues that we face, I don't feel as a carpenter, my time spent now should be working with materials. I think it should be spent working on a more abstract social level. And I don't know how that's going to look yet. It's very much experimental for me. Like I just dropped everything 5 months ago, decided to stop, shut down the company, and I went traveling for some time. and I've been learning things the last 3 months. I took a write-in course. Actually, I took a write-in course from Dan Coe, and this just been kind of life-changing for me, learning to write. So I've spent basically months kind of like digging into this topic, into myself, like because family is a big thing for me as well. Like I've also lived in community all these years, and experimented with people in a close-knit community, and we bought that building and had to renovate it together. So that was also it. I just realized that home has been such a central thing in my life, in my work, my thoughts, what I engage with. It didn't really click before, but it clicked a few months ago. And I feel with the circumstances, like I said, like the state of kind of modern relationships, and I think we need to talk about this. We need something new. Like I've had two amazing relationships in my time in Amsterdam, and I'm really like thankful for these women in my life. But I see some people that haven't even had relationships yet, and they're also in their 30s, and I see some people with like just distrust in relationships and the other sex, and both sides. This is not like just men or just women, like there's two sides to this, and it worries me, and I want to start doing something about it. And like I said, I don't know how that will look yet, but even this conversation is like the first online conversation I've had with someone, so this is also really cool. It's a new step. Yeah.
Yeah, what you just said about men and women reminded me of a conversation that I sort of wanted to develop in an article, but I'm a little bit scared, which is talking about, I guess, the way that I think pop music and sexuality expresses itself in ways that are not one-dimensional. So, like, there's one theory that says, like, okay, well, back in the day you had like Elvis, and he had some level of sexuality, but then that just increases, and now we're at like maximum, and there's some level like soon, like everyone will just be naked, and I don't know what's beyond it, and then like it'll just be pornography fused together, or there's that idea, which I don't think is it's not I think it's appealing to a lot of people because it's a simple idea, and it's not necessarily wrong, but I think it's ignoring a lot of the other dimensions of sexuality that are expressed through music that aren't just, it's not just a linear scale of more to less. And so one of the ways I was thinking about that is like going back to the 1980s or something, we had this huge boom of music, which was like you had Queen. I mean, everybody loved Queen. Everybody loved Prince. Everybody loved Elton John. Everybody loved, these guys, or David Bowie, where there was something a bit androgynous going on. There was something a bit like a lot of them later came out as gay, or even at the time, or even if they weren't gay, there was something, there was a little bit of sparkle. And so I was, thinking about that period. And then as we went through the 90s, we went through this kind of reaction, this grunge, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana thing, where a lot of that sparkle went away. And to the extent that it persisted, it became something like the Backstreet Boys or Justin Bieber, where these are not actually gay men. They're a little bit sparkly, but in a different way. They're not actually like appealing to a male gaze. They're appealing to a female gaze. And then I started to look at the women. Like we had, Cher, and we had Madonna, and we had these big female pop stars, Paula Abdul. And at some point, I think it was around the period of Britney Spears that things started to shift. There's a movie called Mean Girls, and I guess this is probably where I could write the most about it, is to say that in that film, which I'm going to get to a serious point eventually, just bear with me here. But the film Mean Girls is all about this group of women who they really just care about appearances. They really just want to be popular. And in opposition to them, there's this cast of characters who don't quite fit in with the popular girls. And one of them symbolically is a lesbian. So the like there is a sexuality of lesbianism on maybe like a biological level, like a woman who prefers the form of a woman on a sensuous a visual level. But then I think there's also an aspect there where lesbianism is a psychological reaction to the male gaze, where it's like, I'm tired of these guys, I'm tired of them, they're assholes or whatever, and so I'm just going to cut myself off from that, and I'm going to focus on playing a different game because I'm tired of that game, so I'm going to do something different. And so symbolically, even though the vast majority of women are not in fact lesbians, most women are attracted to men to some degree or another. Not all men, but they have their type or something. But lesbianism, I feel like in that moment, in that Mean Girls narrative, became a symbol for women of an escape from a toxic set of gender relations. That the relationship between men and women had just degraded so entirely that I think I'm just going to become a lesbian. Like, that is in one sense a joke, but I think it does speak to a deeper issue. And so now when I look at like popular female artists, I think Chappell or Charlie XCX are like these really new, hot, young female artists. And they always have I talk to people who enjoy, this isn't my genre, but I try to talk to people who are like plugged into the current culture and they're liking the new stuff. And so I'm like, okay, well, this one's a lesbian. This one seems like a lesbian too. No, she's not a lesbian. Okay, but if we dissect that, we're going to get some kind of pro-lesbian positivity symbolism in there. And then you kind of get into this stuff about Katy Perry, where Katy Perry's going to war with the lesbians because she's like appealing too much to the male gaze. And so she's viewed as not fitting into that. So all of this isn't really to directly like attack or defend or say anything about lesbianism as a sexual phenomenon. But to say that I think lesbianism has been appropriated and used in the same way that, gay men were sort of these cultural icons. Not because men, like, I like Queen and I like, Elton John. It doesn't make me gay in terms of my personal life. But I think the reason why men were attracted to that in that moment, it says something. I don't exactly have the full fleshed out theory on that. But I think the symbolic lesbian, like there's a woman on Substack, Catherine D, who writes about the fact that there are a lot of like self-identified bisexual women who have never had any kind of relationship or actual real world experience with a woman ever. But they just say, no, I'm a married woman with children to a man, but I am also a bisexual. So that kind of symbolic lesbianism, I think, is the way that women express their dissatisfaction with men in culture in a very broad sense, without being able to like point a particular finger at a particular man and say this is this guy's fault, but it's their relationship with their fathers, their brothers, their people in their community or whatever. And so I think women are trying to express that. And I don't know what the answer is exactly to that. But I also notice internally within the United States, we have regional cultures. So we have the South and we have country music. And I noticed that like that popular lesbianism is not as predominant there. In fact, we have like I've written a little bit about the Hawk Tuah phenomenon, which is kind of an inverse of that. There's almost a hypersexuality or an openness about sexuality. It's certainly not conservative or traditional, but it's certainly also not lesbian. Like it's very heterosexual. She's like, I really like men, whereas that's almost like, again, with the Katy Perry stuff, it's like if within certain subcultures of the United States, if you are if you're too heterosexual, almost in a sense, like there's a sense that you've like betrayed other women, or you're not practicing that female soul, you're not recognizing the problem, you're ignoring these toxic gender relations that people are struggling to explain. I think a lot of times it's reduced to sexism, but I don't think that's really sufficient, because I think people in the 1980s were a lot more sexist than they are today. So I don't think it's like increasing sexism has resulted in increased like gender toxicity or something like that, or feelings of conflict. Why are people feeling this conflict? And I guess I'll offer my theory, and you can respond to this, is that there's no such thing as like an individual relationship, in the sense of, especially we're talking about something really big like gender. There's no such thing as just saying like, well, you and I are going to have a relationship, or, I'm going to have a marriage. Like, the word marriage itself implies the entire pageantry. Like, what's the most important part of a marriage? It's the ceremony. It's the wedding. And so that's a collective communal action. It's actually, marriage is not between a man and a woman. Marriage is between a couple in the community. That's what a marriage is. If you don't have a wedding ceremony, there's no marriage, effectively. I mean, you could say it's a secret marriage or something, Romeo and Juliet, but it's something different. And so we mediate human relationships through communities and through rituals and traditions that are larger from ourselves, that come from outside ourselves. So the fact that, like, in your profession, you have an intergenerational connection with your profession, that is not increasingly something that people don't have. Like, I couldn't look back and be like, yeah, I have my father's profession. Like, he had his father's profession. And so as we see like that lack of intergenerationality in our music, in our fashion, culture, the slang that we use, economically, our professions, and in terms of our relationships, I think more than any bad thing, because people have always been flawed. We always hurt each other, and we always do bad things to each other. So that's not really new. But in terms of the change over time of, what is a marriage? What is a wedding? What is it supposed to look like? What is a home supposed to look like? Is it supposed to have white walls and be super modern? Is it supposed to be like a cottage? Is it supposed to be like a cabin in the woods? What are these things supposed to be? I think that the uncertainty around, especially women, are very much more sensitive to this than men. Men, they're kind of like, oh, I'm just doing whatever I'm doing. I'm going to travel around, whatever. Some women are like that too. But I think women are sensitive to the loss of community more so than men are. They're the kind of canary in the coal mine, and they're saying, like, we don't even know what it means to be married or have a wedding or to have a relationship or any of that anymore. And that stresses us out. And because we're really stressed out about that, like, this isn't, it's so, the degree of uncertainty is so terrorizing and so upsetting that it's really hard to negotiate just the petty conflicts of life. Like, oh, I want to get Chinese tonight. Oh, I want to get Mexican food or whatever. It's like simple stuff. You can't negotiate that anymore, because this big stuff, this subconscious, like, I'm getting Freudian here, but, this really big stuff is just always like the elephant in the room, this dark shadow, this phantom haunting us. And so that just like infects every little personal interaction. And I think men get annoyed by that. They're like, why can't it's just, just choose what restaurant you want to go to. It's just like focus on one thing at a time. But there's actually a value to almost like an intrusive thought. Like, no, we're not just gonna like take things one day at a time. Like, we have to figure out these big questions, because again, relationships aren't just a moment to moment, oh, let's do whatever we feel like doing. No, there's a process, there's a plan, there's a goal. We're working towards something. You could also say, just in terms of biology, the changing size of families, from bigger families to small families, has taken away that structure, that goal orientation that it was just before. It was just, well, we got these kids, we got to take care of these kids, And so when you have people who don't have children, well, what does a marriage mean if you don't have children? It's not a question that most people had to confront in the past, and now they do. And when people are confronted with the crisis of choice, that introduces a lot of fear and a lot of stress and uncertainty. It places a burden on a relationship that a lot of people aren't able to handle. And I don't think we recognize that. And we try to fix the details. We try to fix, like, oh, did I say the wrong thing? I'll say it in this way. That it's like, No, it's the big plan, it's the big vision that maybe religion provided that, or family size provided that. Um, and so yeah, that's the problem as I see it. Um, from your vantage point, I guess having lived in a couple different countries now, north of England, you talked a little bit about. In fact, when you were talking about that, you said you might not want to talk about what was going on, but for people who aren't from the north of England, I'll just say for the American context, rural parts of the north of England have the GDP per capita equivalently of our Puerto Rico in America, which is a territory that we own, but it's not as wealthy as the other states. So this isn't like when you say it's rough, this is kind of what Americans can think of, and also the fact that traditionally a lot of, in the same way that we have Appalachia. In fact, geologically, Appalachia and Scotland are part of the same mountain range, just separated over millions of years, pulled apart. So it's the same rocks, it's the same stuff. And there's actually a lot of coal, right? So there was a lot of coal mining, there was a lot of industry. But as Britain globalized and outsourced and also environmentally shut down a lot of things, that affected the north of England in the same way that, West Virginia has been affected in America. So for people who aren't aware, I just would add in that caveat or kind of explainer to the American audience. But yeah, I guess I threw out a lot there, but was there anything that, that rung true for you or you want to pick up on?
Definitely got a few things out of that. One thing I will say is I think this is a lot to do with culture. And we've been inventing cultures for a very long time and reinventing them. And I think we're living in a time where we're kind of developing more cultures and more concepts than ever before. Like, we just pop them out. They come out left, right, and center. There's a new genre here and there in music, whatever. It's super fast. And I feel like I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about like what I like to call cultural touch points, where something shifts. And I feel in the last 10 years, there's been a big shift because of data. We've had access to data on everything and everyone, everyone's little habits, what they think, and this has fueled everything. This has fueled industry, advertising. It's just fueled so many things, like even research. It's specific topics are chosen because they're more profitable, which leaves out probably some things that could actually help people, but they're less profitable. And so what I kind of like think with this is indeed we're just rapidly inventing cultures, overwhelming ourselves, and at the same time, I feel like it's almost like you can't actually invent truth, and there's some fundamental things that we as humans need. And because of these changes, the last, maybe you could say since the Industrial Revolution, I like to look at it from that point because a lot changed in the home. We used to live with our grandparents, like with our parents. Our wives would come and move in with it. If we were men, the wife would move into our family home and we'd all live there as a unit together. And we'd build that land, we'd operate with the neighbors, we'd trade. So the other side of that is our community culture changed. And that links in with what you were saying about, you said women how did you say it? Like, are a bit more sensitive to a lack of culture or community, right? And I don't know for that, but I do like recognize this, and I feel like I'm very disillusioned with what community means now, especially living in Amsterdam the last 9 years. Again, I would say I'm very lucky. I've engaged in like some interesting social circles, so I do feel like I have a good idea of what community is, but once I stepped out of that, that live-in situation, actually that vanished from my life, you know? So, and when I see how other people live, because I build their apartments or their houses, I know that they don't even speak to their neighbors, you know? And like it's just got to a point where I wonder, well, it's got to a point where I think, okay, now we need to have a discussion. We need to look at this because we haven't kept up with the basics. We've overwhelmed ourselves. Like you said, we don't have time for shit. Like we can't even think to sit down and have a conversation with your partner because it's too draining. Because you've already done 10 hours today, 8 hours at work or whatever, and the 1 hour, 2 hour commute, you know? And so you don't have energy. Of course you don't, man. Like I remember like when I'm on project and I'm out in the morning and then I'm home later in the afternoon, like I'm exhausted. 8 months ago, I wouldn't have been having this conversation with you at this time. My body was ruined, you know? And so I had to kind of just say to myself, like, okay, what's important here? You know, like really, really think about this, slow down, find the time in life to actually think and start acting on this. And so yeah, I guess I just want to emphasize that. I feel like data changed a lot very quickly. I feel like we need to start talking more because indeed, you know, like there's a I don't think men kind of had their right. I also feel like men, and I'm not saying this to accuse anyone, men have had their identity stripped in many ways, and women have had their status elevated. Now that doesn't always manifest, and it doesn't always manifest socially, but ideologically, that's what's happened. Like I'm not necessarily needed anymore, you know. My partner has her job. She don't need to live with me. She can go live in her own place, and so our relationship has changed. Man and female relationship has changed, but we haven't necessarily really spoke about it. Like I don't really see. I've read a lot of books about this as well. Like of course there is people experimenting with various different relationship types, but they're still experiments. There's nothing that we've been doing for long enough to say this is replicable and it works for a lot of people. Um, and I don't know if it's supposed to. Like, I love the idea of a big turnover right now. I love the idea of a big experimentation, a big shift in framework, something new. And, you know, I love this idea that we have this opportunity to do it, but I think it takes work. And we're not giving it that attention right now, like individually, but also collectively. Like, we don't even really have collective priorities. Like we can't agree on jack shit, you know. It's we're so divided and not even divided like upon points of left and right anymore. There's like ideological factions, and if you are not in that faction, you're an enemy, and that worries me. It's like, what do we want here? Do we want to like separate more and more and more and pull into these tiny little isolated factions with labels? Like, you know, you could I have many like friends who you could call queer or whatever. Like they're not straight, you know, of varying different kind of cultures within that scene alone. So everything is like multicolored. But I also feel people are being a little bit stubborn. And what worries me actually is I feel like I came out when like I said earlier, you know, I had an interest in late teens, got in a lot of trouble, and I was very angry as a young man, you know? And now I've kind of forgotten my point. Was very angry. Yeah, I feel like when I got to a certain age, be it 16, the reality that I saw, the lens in which I saw life through was shattered in front of my face. And I was scarred from that, you know. But on that day, what I did, I had to pick up a tiny piece of glass and raise it to my eye. And that was the lens that I saw the world through for a very long time, you know? And it takes a lot of courage to kind of be like, actually, is this a teenage nightmare at this point? Am I in my own teenage nightmare? Never mind what other people are telling you, because I was. I was in my own teenage nightmare. I was very angry. I wasn't seeking male female relationships, and that didn't happen till I was like 22, you know? Always had things going on, whatever, but I never had a solid girlfriend until I was like 23. I didn't want to do it. And there was many other things, like many other things, many other issues, you know, that again, a lot of anger. But after a point, I said, well, you know, like, wait a minute. Yeah, is this a teenage nightmare? And do I need to start making some changes, you know, and start thinking that there could be something different, and I can create it, right? I can also create it. I don't have to point at problems every day. I can go and create solutions to my problems and my friends' problems and anyone who is in the room with me. And I get that a lot from carpentry. Was really interesting to me. Like I was told I would fail in school, and from a very young age, like 7, they said you're not going to even get through first school. And I passed every single year despite this, you know, like sometimes with above average, but I didn't pay attention. I didn't, and I didn't write notes in my book, but apparently I didn't need to. And so, like, yeah, growing up, there was just a lot of issues I alone had to deal with, you know, that other people don't know about. There's a lot that people don't know about. They don't know why you think that way. They don't know why you're angry about that, or why you're angry at men, or why you're angry at women. They just don't know. You know, like you could have been mistreated by a woman, and you could have been mistreated by a man. It there's assholes everywhere, and I just feel like for those that feel like they're sane, maybe now is a time to go find some other sane people, sane-ish, like I feel like you are, that you're just having talks with people. You don't have to have the right answer, you know, and that's kind of where I'm at, like with relationships, like friends, women. Like I think now we just gonna have to start talking and hope we can create some new frameworks, because we it's kind of on us. Like no one's done it for us. Like the previous generations, they didn't take an interest. We have, you know, so then we're gonna have to do something about it. And again, I think sadly, men are gonna have to do a lot more work than women this time round, just because of the difficulty in what they have to get over. I feel like women have more of a culture of improving themselves just from how they're raised, you know, like, and I do believe that women tend to be better off taking care of themselves. They kind of have to, actually, by nature, because of their period. They have to carry certain things around. They have to clean certain things, you know. So they do have a much better culture of self-improvement and taking care of themselves than men do. And I just, that's not an accusation. Like, I'm a fucking man, you know. But we are going to kind of have to step up at this point, like especially if we're not happy with things, you know. So yeah, I will just leave it there, you know. Like,
The thing that you said that struck me was men are not as needed as they used to be, and you talked a lot about anger, and I think that a lot of men are angry that they're not needed. They're not angry that they don't have power over others. They're not angry that they don't have enough material wealth. They're not angry that, whatever, people don't bow down and kiss their feet or something. They're like, I have a desire to serve. I have a desire to be part of something bigger than myself. I have a desire for all I really want. Like, I want to work hard, and I want to be a provider. I want to be strong. I want to be, responsible and dutiful. But somebody needs to give me that thing that I'm supposed to be responsible and dutiful for. And I agree that for women, there is a there's kind of there's I think this is something that, again, on a surface level, I might as well be speaking gibberish, but women are kind of more self-reliant in the sense that, you can kind of take a woman and you can put her in a strange land, in a strange circumstance. And I've seen it, I've seen that kind of thing firsthand. Because I think a lot of times we confuse physical independence with emotional independence. Like, yeah, if you take a man, like you take Bear Grylls, you take some, Army Ranger, and you put him in the middle of the Amazon jungle. Is he going to be able to build a fire and hunt and do all those things and be self-sufficient in a physical sense? Sure. But, if you take a woman, like, and she moves from one school to another, in childhood, and you plop her in a new social circumstance. Like I was looking at some of the stuff about, transgenderism and how people get into that. And there was this story, Christina Heinemann, and she was talking about how she was homeschooled and probably had some kind of Christian upbringing or something, or conservative upbringing, but she was thrown into public school at the worst time. She's going through puberty. She's a teenager. It's confusing. She's thrown into public school. And what she immediately does is she attaches herself to the group of kids who are kind of most open to outsiders, which is all the queer and trans kids in the high school. And so instead of like maintaining her independence of identity, she just is like, well, I guess I'm trans now too, because she's going to fit into that. So women have like a great deal of emotional flexibility to adapt to new situations, no matter what they are. They can go from this to that. Whereas a lot of times you look at the loneliest kid in class or the school shooter archetype, it's like some kid at the back of the class who doesn't fit in. Why is he so angry? Why doesn't he feel accepted? Why doesn't he get on with the other kids? There could be a lot of different reasons, but he doesn't have the emotional flexibility to blend in or to fit in or to jump through those hoops or to change himself. He's got some kind of internal resistance. And because no one's willing to go over and like force him to change and to conform, or, for whatever reason he's unable to do that, then he can remain that way for the rest of his life or as long as he wants to. So yeah, the ability of women to just deal with, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the new circumstance. And so I'm going to have to figure out how to take care of myself. It's not that, every woman is doing great. I think a lot of women are really struggling, sometimes as much or more than men. Everyone's an individual, right? But the number of young men I talk to who they can't get out of bed. They're not taking it. I mean, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not saying this from the high and mighty of I always take care of myself, and all you pawns down there, you can't take care of yourselves. It's like,
Same.
Have you brushed your teeth today? Have you taken a shower? And again, it's not a black and white male versus women, but I've just talked to so many men where they feel like, well, no one really needs me. No one really cares about me. So why bother taking care of myself? Whereas for women, you can call it superficial or whatever label you want to put on it, but like, they will take care of themselves because they care, for better or worse, they care what other people think. Even if no one else is around, they're going to kind of take care of themselves. And they're that kind of like self-improvement stuff. It's less stigmatized. Like if you're a man and you're like, you know what, I'm going to diet and exercise and learn about fashion and try to make the best of myself. Like there's almost a culture. And I think it's not just men who do this to other men, but even women who do this to men, of saying like, why aren't you perfect already? Why do you want to improve yourself? Or, there's this slew of criticism. Whereas for women, it's much less intense, I think, as a woman to be involved in some sort of self-improvement of any kind. Everyone just sees that as normal. So I think there's a recognition that, yeah, men aren't meant like, whereas women improving themselves, we all kind of accept that as a normal state of affairs. If a man is like, well, I'm going to improve myself because like, forget society, forget you guys, like I'm doing this for me. Everyone recognizes there's something wrong with that, like on a deep level, even though obviously, you've gotten out of the the trash heap of not taking care of yourself, you still haven't gone, like, you're still stuck in this one man is an island mindset. Like, actually, Bear Grylls surviving in the Amazon rainforest, okay, that's impressive, but like without, a society without women, like, why bother? Like, why survive in the rainforest if you're just going to be stuck out there alone? The only reason why men are blessed with these skills and these tools, the ability to build things and to create and to fight, is so that we can protect the woman who's pregnant for 9 months, so that she has the free time to take care of the kids and so on, to take care of those things. Otherwise, really, what's the point? And a lot of guys, whether they're honest about that or not, they feel that. They feel like, oh, I have no motivation. It's like, well, if you had some starving kids on your hands, I'm pretty sure you'd have some motivation, because every single one of your ancestors going back a million years figured it out. They figured it out. Why can't you figure it out? Because it's not a problem to be solved in terms of, oh, if I just read the right book, I'll get the right motivation. If I follow the right 12-step program, I'll get the right motivation. It's like when there's a crisis, and they know this in wartime, when bombs are falling on the city, people come together. Doesn't matter you had a disagreement with your neighbor. People come together. When there is a need, when there's necessity, people come together and they figure it out. And the fact that so many people feel like they're not needed and there is no necessity, where there's a will, there's a way. And if there's no crisis, there's no will. It's like people need a crisis, and so then they start inventing crises that we might say are silly. Like you said, where, okay, there's a queer culture, but then each of them needs to differentiate themselves and be opposed to each other. And you might say, oh, that's silly. But what they're doing is they're trying to create a crisis that they can work on. They're trying to create a crusade or a project or a quest that they can work on and say, well, I'm fighting for this culture. Oh, no, I'm fighting for this different culture. Okay, well, whether that's real or fake, it's like they're getting to something that we need, like that survival instinct that you have to tap into. It says, like, my actions, like what I do, if I do what I'm supposed to do, if I like do my duty and I do what's morally right, or I do what is morally wrong, that can tip the balance either way. And like this ship could land in the treasure island, or it could sink. But it's like my actions have weight, they have meaning, and they matter. When you think you're like a lone man on a pale blue dot in a dark sky in a black universe, and no one really cares what you do, yeah, really hard to convince yourself. Like all of that narrative, we talk about self-love. This is another angle on it, is that for women, the concept of self-love just makes a lot more intuitive sense. Like, oh, of course I love myself. Why? Because my body is like the temple of creation. This is where the babies get made, right? So I got to take care of myself. Of course I self-love. Whereas for a man, it's like, it's not so intuitive that you should love yourself, in fact. And sometimes it's like more intuitive to say, like, maybe I should sacrifice myself. Maybe like a little pain is good. So these very different approaches, these two different perspectives, they're both useful, they're both necessary, they both have their place, but it means that, yeah, the struggle for women definitely is different for men, and a lot of times what men are craving is they're craving like a kick in the ass or a war or an emergency. Like, man, I would love it if that's the fantasy. I think a lot in political terms, people project that of like, I hope that everything just collapses, and then finally people are going to need me, because they're going to need protection, they're going to need food, they're going to need shelter, and finally, like, I'll be needed. So sometimes you're mixing together like some sadism, some anger, but also a genuine desire to sacrifice oneself and to serve other people. So as much as I get frustrated with people when they're like, oh, I just, I hate everybody, and I wish everything would just collapse. On some level, that is a desire, like deep down inside. I believe that's a desire to love, which I define as sacrificing on behalf of other people. I think that's the deepest expression of love. So I think people are looking for an opportunity to love, and they just don't see it. they feel it's blind, or it's a deeper form of loneliness. Like, I think a lot of people say they're lonely, and what they mean is, I don't have an opportunity to love people. I don't have an opportunity to sacrifice for people, because there's people everywhere. Like, there's cities everywhere. You can go around and be with people. You can get on an app. You can meet people, talk to people, have sex with people, whatever you want to do with people. There's prostitutes in Amsterdam. You could,
Yeah,
if you want some kind of a connection on a superficial level, it's there. But if you want to sacrifice for somebody, you can't pay a prostitute to sacrifice. You can't get on an app. You can't get on an app and say, looking to sacrifice my life or something. They just take it as a joke, and it's a funny joke, but it's like, that's the problem as I see it. It's not an analytical problem. It's not, we're not smart enough. We're smarter than we've ever been, basically, at least book smart, more educated, but we've lost our problems. Like, there's a map of the world.
yeah.
There's nowhere to explore. There's no mystery. There's no, like, oh, no one's ever been to this country before, I'll go and explore it. And, that's already been figured out. So, like, the message is, we don't need you. You're not needed. You're, like, superfluous. And then people treat themselves like trash because that's the story of their lives.
I mean, it's the thing. It's just not true, though. We have huge problems. We have huge issues. I feel like we have huge issues. If you want to go find a dragon, there's many out there, There are many, many dragons out there to go and slay. And I don't say this like I've also been in really hard times, but it's like about picking yourself up over and over again. I think that's also what it is to be a man, because some battles, you don't die, but you don't win either. And you've got to get back up. And, you're not going to sit there and lie on the battlefield. So I think, again, it's just like, what do you want for yourself, Because I say this and I talk about this because I want people to believe in themselves, not to accuse them, not to say, hey, like, I'm perfect. I'm not like that. I'm not at all. Like, I'm a carpenter, and there was many days, like many jobs I fucked up, many clients I've upset, many things went well, but there's also many days I couldn't get out of bed, and I've had extreme burnouts, And it's been a really difficult phase leaving what I had built, and now I'm also moving country. I broke up with my beautiful girlfriend, like, because she wants to stay here. And I can't live this lifestyle anymore. I've lived in Amsterdam and in the city for 10 years, and it's just not, for me, it's not where I want more time for myself. I want to raise my children. I want to have energy for them. I want to not have problems because I've had time to solve them. I don't care about money. I don't need that much, Like, I want to go out there and find something new. Like, I'm literally leaving the place I am because it's not, I feel like it's left as something empty in me. And I'm a big nature lover, and there is no nature in the Netherlands. It's the flattest country on the planet, and it's a wetland, so there are no forests. It's literally the marsh, the wetland, the floodplains of Europe, So, like, this is people settled here, but it's, I would. So, it's like, if you're not happy, go off on a big adventure. Go find something, create meaning for yourself. Like, you don't have to be perfect day to day. And like, and also, you also don't have to go on a big adventure. You can stay at home if you want. You can stay at home, but just like, do a bit to take care of yourself, like, do a bit to educate yourself, and try make small changes, because maybe you'll regret it at some point, like not going on that adventure, And I just feel like it's time, like, because like you said as well, like, there's also a lot of women who are unhappy and also haven't benefited from this new circumstance. Like, now there's also a lot of men that are quite willing to just walk away from relationships, if they even if they've had children. Whereas before, if they were living in the village, they wouldn't have been able to do that because the family and everyone around, like, it just that's not how it worked. Like, it just didn't work like that. You'd have had to run away from the village. You'd have lost your house. You'd have had no money. Like, it wasn't so easy to go off on that adventure then. But now you can fucking go on that adventure whenever you want. Like you said, you can just jet off and go wherever. But yeah, it's an interesting time because it's difficult, but it's also a really amazing time. Like, if you want it to be, it can be amazing. It really can. And it's just like how far you're willing to go, and because I don't think that there's any real limits to our engagement anymore. I can have a conversation with you across the pond, and we can go on YouTube and find out that information that we needed. Like, I did so many jobs where I was like, how to do this, like, and I would literally have my drill in my hand and my phone in the other, and I could figure it out, but like previous to that, we never had access to kind of such like skill and information downloads like this before. And I just feel like if you want to change, like, it's a great time to go do it. It really is. And why not? Like, why the hell not?
Yeah, that's a pretty good. I don't know if I can top that one. I think that might be the. I think that might be the final word on that. This has been a great conversation, and all of these, I basically I don't know what's going to come of them, or, I think a big thing is just like thinking about form, thinking about poetry, and how people, like, each person is a structure. We have our own acoustics, we have our own, height, width, and geometry. I mean, we're like, as much as a building is mathematical, we're mathematical. We have symmetry, and each of us has our kind of own genre. Everybody, you could kind of put people in different categories. Some people are wide, and some are narrow, and so I think these types of conversations where people are just willing to jump on, and like present the holistic structure rather than, because a lot of the things we've talked about, it's not, again, the point is not that we're I don't know, trying to be original for the sake of being original. Like, and I think with your home building, it's like, you're not just trying, the purpose isn't to, sometimes the most beautiful thing is not like the most original thing. And sometimes the most original thing is not the most beautiful thing. So it's again, the way I feel it is, it's less about like copywriting the truth and saying like, oh, you have some secret truth no one has ever heard of before. And if you say anything anyone's ever said before, then that means you have nothing to say, and it's
Yeah.
not of worth. Instead of viewing the way that we kind of view other people as a resource, where they have these like data, like you said, we have this data we have to extract from each person. And if you don't have any new data, oh, I've already got that data, it's useless. Instead, seeing it as, it's not data, it's not information in the sense of like uniqueness, but it's about presenting. And my battery's gonna die here, so this is gonna be the last word that I say, and then I'm gonna hand it off to you for final thoughts. It's about, can you present something in a way that is compelling to a particular person? And it's not going to be the same thing for everybody, but just the way that you've expressed yourself today, I found it very compelling in a different way than, than I've heard from anybody else just because that's that's who you are. But we're gonna wrap it up now. So yeah, Tommy, appreciate you having you on. If you want to give any final thoughts, projects, things you're working on, people you're reading, stuff you would suggest, anything you want to throw out there.
So I currently just came online. If you want to check me out on X, I'm mostly active there. Like I said, I made an account 2 months ago. After kind of, I want to come online. I want to start having conversations with people. What I'm reading a lot on Substack, or at least I found some really interesting stuff on Substack. I've liked is it Cultural Drift? I think that one I've really liked so far. You can find me on Substack as well, Substack or X, and I actually have the recommendations there. I can't find them now. But yeah, like I said, I'm moving to Italy. I have some plans. I'm planning to announce them slowly. I'm working on my writing, working on my texts, and working on something new. But it's a little bit experimental right now. So I don't have too much to offer anyone. I'll say, hey, go check this, but slowly, I'm I'm starting a podcast or more of a conversation with a woman, and we're going to have various discussions and also guests. So maybe we can also invite you onto that when we get that going. That'd be cool. But yeah, that's all. Thanks for having me, man. And it's been really good talking to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tommy, and hopefully next time I talk to you, it'll be on your podcast. But in either case, hope to talk to you again soon.
You too, man.
Cheers. Take care.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. All right, guys. Sorry, I had my computer. I have a very low battery life. This is an old computer. This is ancient computer. So the battery is not too good, and you do an hour-long conversation. I guess, yeah, it wasn't at full battery, but it was not at a dangerous level, and I just forgot to plug it in because I was in a rush. I set myself up, and I was in a rush, and I forgot to plug it in. So it actually died during this recording. So I apologize about that disruption. Very unprofessional on my part, but hopefully it's not too disruptive. Hopefully you guys didn't disrupt the flow. I mean, it was toward the end anyway. I should have paused the recording. I should have plugged it in immediately. Like, it literally, it doesn't give me a 10-minute warning, 15-minute. No, it gives me a 30-second warning. It'll say, warning, your battery's about to die. So I should have paused the recording and said, okay, let me plug this in, and then we'll do that. But I didn't catch it. I wasn't fast enough. Oh, well. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's not often that I get to talk to a carpenter, and I really do. I'm really impressed by that diversity of perspective. Obviously, I come at things from a very academic, book-smart perspective. So to be able to talk to somebody who's, bringing some other skills to the table and isn't just a word cell kind of thing, I think is valuable. So hopefully I'll just keep meeting people, keep talking to people. And again, it's not learning new data, but it's about wisdom penetrating into the brain past those subconscious defenses that we have, like really integrating wisdom into your life isn't a result of reading a book. I mean, you can read a book about this or that subject, but it's not necessarily going to change your life in the same way that, having somebody with a certain presentation, a certain style, a certain perspective is going to be able to speak to you in a different way. So, and everybody's different. So it's not, this podcast it's not going to penetrate people's, most of people's brains, but the hope is that I'm just running the gamut. I'm just like going around the color wheel, and I'm trying to figure out, which angle of attack hits people the right way. And then, that creates an impact. And then they go and they they make an impact, and that's how we get that that kind of exponential growth, I suppose. So I do the articles. I mean, I put out my perspective, kind of like the machine gun, sort of just like, this is what I'm good at. I'm just going to keep doing this and hammering that away continuously over and over again. That's my craft. That's my carpentry. But, trying to not just be vertical in my thinking, but also horizontal. That was the attempt with this conversation. So I hope you guys liked it. If you did, give it a like, give it a comment, restack it. And if you want to support me financially, this is Substack's my only income stream. I'm not a crypto guy. I'm not a programmer. I'm not doing anything on the side. I'm not moonlighting. This is my full-time, doing interviews, doing articles every single day. No breaks. We take a weekend here or there. We have personal relationships. We try to not be totally antisocial, but if you guys can support, great. If not, please morally support me so that I don't feel like a crazy person for doing this. Please morally support me so I don't feel like a lone prophet in the wilderness. Give me some encouragement. All right. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching or listening. And I always say I'll see you next time, but